co-author with Manuela Caiani, and I'm now, as you said, as for today, actually a postdoctoral researcher at the Université de Namur in Belgium. But I started this project with Manuela while I was also at the Scuola Normale Superiore, and this is part of a broader project which is called Outlib, and we used some of Outlib data to come up with this idea that we are submitting for publication. So we would like to collect some feedback from you. We can, as you can see, the title is Climate Discourse and Radical Right Environmentalism, Transnational Narratives and Ideological Framing. And we can go to next slide. The core question guiding this research is whether radical right actors are developing a transnational discourse that goes beyond climate denialism. And we operationalized this research question into several sub-questions and analytical dimensions. So basically, we looked at the thematic salience of environmental related content diffused online by radical right actors on Facebook. Then we looked at framing strategies, so how they are talking about the environment. And then also we looked at diffusion dynamics of these framing strategies among countries. Indeed, the project that I mentioned before is conducted by looking at 7 European countries, and we looked at Facebook data of over 70,000 posts. And so, as I said, our core idea is looking at diffusion dynamics of far-right political discourse by looking at whether similar frames are used by different actors across Europe. And so our contribution, as this slide shows, is twofold. So we would like to see how ecological themes are incorporated into far-right ideological repertoires, and whether or not there are potential patterns of diffusion in radical right environmental discourse. We can go to next slide. So basically, we distinguish between diffusion and transnationalization. In our understanding, the difference is a difference of degree. So diffusion can be understood as the dynamic in which different actors put similar discursive emphasis on specific issues without formal collaboration or without any other data that we can look at that shows actual transnationalization dynamics. So in a way, we are looking at frame alignments, so whether or not they are using the same frame for talking about the environment as a proxy of future potential transnational diffusion. So in our understanding, common frames operates as ideational infrastructures for the development of this new narrative of the radical right on the environment. Indeed, we have also a broader goal, which is that of understanding whether the ideological dimensions of the radical right is actually changing by going beyond the usual topics such as immigration, race, and nationalism. So whether or not the environment as an issue is becoming more central in the development of an European ideological strategy for the radical right. And we can go to the next slide. So our research project is that by looking at the literature and also by provisionally analyzing data, we looked that actually there is a shift in the way in which the radical right is looking at the environment that goes beyond denialism and skepticism, that, as I will show in the literature review part of this presentation, is the mainstream way political science and sociology are looking at at the role of radical right actors when dealing with the environment. And so our understanding is that there is actually a more nuanced relationship between the radical right and the environment. And this is precisely this evolving and more nuanced relationship that we would like to look at in this paper. So as I said, we so to speak, we divided the core research question into two sub-questions. The first one is which themes are the most covered by radical right actors? So through content analysis, we looked at what they are talking about. Then we focused more on environmental content, and we proceeded through a frame analysis of these environmental contents in order to look at how they are talking about this the environment. And our initial suspect was that they are not actually just denying climate change or avoiding the issue. They are actually engaging with that. And then through network analysis, we looked at whether these frames are actually circulating among different European countries in order to unpack dynamics of diffusion. We can go to the next slide. So let's start with a bit of literature review. So as I said, denialism is the traditional default position of radical right-wing and radical right-wing populist parties according to the literature. But more recent studies shows that there is a shift towards innovative position. For instance, epistemic skepticism or response skepticism that has been defined by authors such as Forchner and Lubarda. So they are saying that they are still skeptic, but they are not just saying, for instance, climate change is not an issue. They are, for instance, saying this solution to climate change is pointless, is not working. So they are still denying, but engaging with the topic. And so we would like to see whether there is more than that, also a more strategic positioning on climate issues. And that's why we, starting from this, we built some part of our analysis, and we can go to next slide. But of course, we are not doing this from scratch. There is already some recent literature that captures some trend in radical right environmentalism. So there are papers which are trying to capture nationalistic frame to climate policies. So they are trying to demonstrate that the discourse on the environment is being englobated into the more nationalistic frame, which is typical of radical right actors. There are also recent papers that highlight a new cleavage in the climate discourse with the progressive and left-wing actors that are trying to frame climate change as an urgent matter. Whether on the other hand, radical right actors are saying, okay, maybe climate change is an issue, environmental issues is an issue, but it's actually not urgent. Also, there are other emerging trends, for instance, eco-nationalism, which is a more sophisticated version of what we just said about incorporating nationalistic frames into climate policies, but also what Manuela indeed and Lubarda in a recent article called conditional environmentalism, which is to say being strategically in favor of some climate policies or climate issues because this has to do with the broader strategy of the radical right. For instance, being in favor of some policies or some protest, for instance, because there is a broader project that has to do with the defense of core values of the radical right. For instance, it's telling examples that farmers' protests are usually backed by radical right actors, and this could be an example of conditional environmentalism, for instance. Then there is also an emerging trend which denounces the economic cost of climate policies, of implementing climate policies. And so this demonstrates that our initial understanding of something is going on, it's actually also pictured by the relevant literature. And we can go to the next slide. So that's why we wanted to jump in this debate by using our own data. So as I said, we collected through CrowdTangle, which is a platform that unfortunately is no longer exists, but it was a very user-friendly platform in which you could scrape legally Facebook data. And so we scraped posts from 2012 to 2024, more than 70,000 posts by all the available pages of radical right actors in 7 European countries, precisely Italy, France, United Kingdom, Austria, Czech Republic, Hungary, and Poland. So this picture here summarizes our methodological approach, which is divided into 3 parts. So the first one was a content analysis, and we basically divided the text. We classified the text into relevant policy categories, such as this post is dealing with migration, this post is dealing with gender issues, this post is dealing with environmental issues, and so on. And we used a BERT model classification in order to do that. Then we had the topic distribution in each country. Then, as I said, we just focused on environmental topics, and we used a frame analysis. But here again, we used a computational frame analysis because we implemented a LLM-based classification. We used GPT-4o through the API in order to classify these contents into relevant frames that I will show later, frames that we derived both from the literature, as I showed before, and from our preliminary inductive analysis of a subsample of the data. So we had the distribution of frames that are used in each country in order to talk about the environment. Finally, we implemented a network analysis where we looked at which frames are used by different actors. So if the vast majority of frames in one actor used is frame A, and so is the case with actor B, we connected these 2 actors. So Facebook pages was the node, and the dominant frame was the edge. As I said before, for the sake of clarity, this is just a proxy of transnationalization and diffusion, because, as you can tell yourself, it's not say that if 2 actors are using the same frame, then they have more structured connections, such as they participate to the same events or they participate to the same conference, so they are actually talking together of these issues. But nevertheless, it means that they are framing this issue in the same way, and this could potentially lead to further transnationalization effects. We can go to next slide. So this is some preliminary results. On the left, we have the topic distribution by country, and as you can see, let alone the posts that are classified as other content, which in a way it's data in itself, because I am right now in another project, and we are witnessing a lot of non-political data, or this kind of residual category that is becoming more and more present. Maybe it means that online communication also, if you are a political actor, is actually structured around non-political issues that maybe have some kind of mobilizing effect as well. And this could be also an object of study, but this is not the point of today's presentation. So let alone this residual category, we have migration, which dominates the narrative, and it's not surprisingly. And we have in some countries a social policy as well, and education and culture. If you look at the percentage of environmental content, what is evident is that it's very marginal and residual. So it means that as of today, in the past 12 years, the environment is not a central issue of radical right actors. And if you look at the right chart, you can see that there is a percentage that goes from 4% to 8% of the total cost devoted to the environment. What is interesting is that we can see actually a kind of east-west divide, with the central and eastern country being more engaged with the environment, which is in a way telling, and maybe we can discuss potential explanation of why. But if we go to the next slide, there is a more interesting trend. As you can see, if we look at the diffusion of the presence of environmental content over time, there is a growing trend with different peaks actually, but the vast majority of them are after 2002. So it means that in the last 3 years, the vast majority of content related to the environment has been produced. And these signal two insights in our analysis. The first one is a general upward shift in far-right engagement with environmental issue, which is evident in the figure. And second one, it's exactly this this presence of various peaks depending on the countries that might signal that there are crisis, for instance, or events that triggers this change of trend in each country. So our point is, despite the fact in the last 12 years, environment is, yes, still a residual issue. Nevertheless, in the last years, it's becoming more and more engaged with by radical right actors as well. We can go in the next slide. So we concentrated on environmental content only in our second part of the analysis, and we came up with a qualitative schema in order to perform our computational frame analysis. So, as I said, based on both the relevant literature and inductive reading of subsample of the data, we came up with these frames. So we put the denialism and skepticism frame, we put it there, and we wanted to measure it. So how much of this content is actually denialist or skeptic towards the environment. And then we divided other competitive, so to speak, frames into policy engagement frames, populist and oppositional frames, and response skepticism frames. As for the policy engagement one, we looked at economic frames, for instance, posts denouncing the cost of economic policies. Nationalistic frames, for instance, posts that are saying stuff like the EU is imposing this Green Deal, but we should decide at the national level how to deal with climate change, for instance. And then anti-globalist frame that are, for instance, the UN want us to spend all our money on climate change, but they are unelected people. We don't trust them. Then there are populist and oppositional frames that we called elite hypocrisy and criminalization of the enemy. So there are a lot of posts that deal with this left-wing activist or this progressive activist is talking all the time about the environment, and then he or she is using a private jet to fly to Davos for a climate conference, for instance. And so this is denouncing the hypocrisy of progressive environmentalism. And then there is the criminalization of the enemy. So, for instance, this Friday for Future protest, they destroyed something in this city. They are not civil society, but they are just criminals, for instance. And then there is response skepticism, ineffective of climate policies. So, for instance, having electric cars, it simply doesn't work. May be good for the environment, but it's not working for mobility issues. Climate policy as cultural displacement. It's we classified some posts such as they are having very weird ideas. So they want us, for instance, to live all together and to have a very, very distant way of living of what is normal, for instance, in order to solve the climate crisis. And then there is climate activism as a misinformed ideology, when they said, for instance, they are saying that climate change is #1 priority, but actually there are scientists that say that actually climate change is for the best, for instance, something like that. Of course, all these examples I just came up with, but they are similar to what we actually found. What is still interesting in this qualitative analysis is that, as you can say, despite a shift towards more engagement, so they are actually talking about the issues, they are saying something about it, it's always both oppositional and negative. So they are not saying, for instance, okay, electric car is not working, let's try some other technology or something like that. They are still opposing what progressive or left-wing actors are instead try to build on the environment. And this is also a finding in itself. And we can go to the next slide, because through computational analysis, we measured the frames. So let alone neutral frames that, for instance, are detected when there is just, for instance, I don't know, Tesla release a new electric car. For instance, it's not judgmental or anything. It's just stating a fact. So, for instance, news sometimes are under the label of neutral frames. Then we have a lot of nationalistic frame. So it means that the vast majority of the political content on the environment that we detected is actually framed under nationalistic lenses. So there is this coherence with eco-nationalism. Then there is economic frames. So, for instance, a lot of posts are dealing with the economic cost of environmental policies. And this means that, for instance, policy engagement, although negative, is higher than, for instance, populist engagement. For instance, if you look at the elite hypocrisy or climate activism as a misplaced ideology, they are present, but they are lower than what we would expect. What is interesting is that denial or skepticism is very low in terms of frame distribution. This means that there is actually this reshifting of the narrative towards something else, still oppositive, still contentious, still not proactive, but not denialist in itself. And we can go to the next slide. So what we try to do, as I said, is try to see, okay, we have the content related to the environment, we have the way they talk about the environment. Let's see whether or not there are transnational patterns. As I said, diffusion patterns, I should say. As I said before, this is just a proxy. So we used frame alignment, which is a concept in social movement studies mostly. So whether there are similar frame adopted by different radical right actors, there is a proxy of transnationalization. Common frames are ideational infrastructures. And so we try to perform this in the form of network analysis, and this is the preliminary results. We did two things. First one is we looked at the national network, so each country in itself, in order to see whether there are different different contextual elements that could provide different structures. For instance, if you see in this table, we have different network size in different countries, different structures, and different centralization metrics. And so also we have a part of the paper that looks at, which is not here in the presentation, but could be useful to understand better this table. For instance, we looked at countries where media news are leading the debate, for instance, are producing more frames, or politicians, and also the extent to which the same frames are used by different actors, and there are national differences. So our idea was also to say whether this ideological convergence is also partially embedded into different national opportunity structures, so to speak. We can go to next slide. So, for instance, we try to summarize these different configuration of networks into three types: echo chamber networks, extreme centralization, high cohesion, and ideological homogeneous messages, multipolar coalitions. These networks have a more balanced structure, multiple actors, potential for greater pluralism. And then there is media-driven strategic hub, smaller network with a couple of central actors connecting all the others. So it means that all or nearly all of the frames are produced by few actors. Then in the next slide, we went through a more general visualization of the transnational network, which is more difficult to grasp with this methodology, because, as I said, it's the connection are just using the same frames, basically. So whether we could be a bit more confident that two actors in the same national system using the same network, using the same frame, are actually connected. This is not the case at the transnational level. We are aware of this. This is a limitation of our paper, but this is the best we could do with the data at our disposal. And so we think we need more additional data. So, for instance, we would need a way of finding connection between the nodes that is more straightforward. So, for instance, retweets on Twitter, or participation at same events, something that is a proof that they actually know each other and they are endorsing each other. What we could do, though, with this transnational network analysis is a ranking of the actors overall. So which one is using more frames, which one is more central in the networks, and so on. And then maybe in future works we could go in deeper details on what they are doing with the environmental issues, and so on. We can go to the next slide, and I'm going towards the conclusions. So to sum up this presentation, we looked in this paper at the role of environmental discourse as potential transnational alignments among far-right actors in Europe through the diffusion of common frames. So there is a growing presence of environmental themes that is accompanied by new interpretative schema on the environment, and this is maybe the most important finding of our paper. Then we have a more nuanced picture on whether common frames and themes diffuse across national contexts, mostly because of the data at our disposal that are not sufficient enough to have a broader picture. And we can go to the last slide. So what we can take home from this is that far-right engagement with the environment shows actually a shift from denialism to more nuanced form of discursive contestation. These new forms of discursive contestation are exemplified by innovative frames that are used. And then we use the diffusion of these frames as a proxy of transnationalization, but for instance, more broader studies on other indicators could give us a better picture on whether or not this is developing innovative narratives on the environment that is reshaping the way radical right actors in Europe look at the environment, and through this change, they are changing the ideological milieu of the radical right in Europe as a whole. Thank you, and looking forward for the discussion.